You know, I'm surprised I didn't notice this sooner, but the actresses behind Ruru and Emiru, they have the exact same last name, same kanji and everything. I mean, obviously they're not related, but still, I just find that kind of interesting. Also, can you tell that there's a significant age gap between these two? God, Japanese do not know how to age. Following last week's somewhat controversial episode, Ruru and Emiru felt it necessary to remind us of that delightful little bit of forced resolution. Granted, all this hasn't been the most disappointing bit of superhero media I've seen recently. That dishonor goes to The Incredibles 2. Come at me, Pixar fanboys. But yeah, after going about 100 miles an hour last time, they decided to slow things down a little. Ruru in particular seeming to decelerate to a much more natural pace for her character development by giving a somewhat stiff greedy introduction as the newest Precure. Which does make sense, as even though she has become close with Emiru, it doesn't mean her abilities with formalities is going to instantly improve. And to be fair, her introduction was probably better than the one from my first job interview. Always remember, put your phone on silent, lest you want your new employers to know how far down you've fallen the otaku hole. Speaking of job interviews, Kryosu was holding one for their newest employee, Jealous. Now, according to the Precure Wikipedia, she's supposedly based off of Japan's lost decade, 1991 to 2000, even sporting a design based off a popular comedian from that time period, which would actually make a lot of sense, especially regarding her sudden rivalry with Purple. For those who keep up with my reviews, you might remember me explaining how Purple was based off of Japan's bubble economy period, a time in which the whole country was rich, and gave into their base desires, trying to live it up, until they woke up the next morning to find their wallets completely empty. The lost decade was that particular morning after, a period in which the country desperately tried to recuperate its losses, even inviting more females into the male-dominated workplace. It also happened to be the decade in which Kamen Riders disappeared from TV. Sorry, couldn't help myself. But yeah, now we've got an interesting little dynamic between the villains. Much like how Purple looked down on Charlie, who was essentially the embodiment of the current generation of millennials, Jealous was looking down on her senior who had failed many times before. An embodiment of the lost decade, saying that she'll clean up the messes produced by the embodiment of the bubble period. You know, even though they messed up the Six Ranger introductions, I always gotta give the show credit whenever they do stuff like this. Anyway, President Kurai, who just so happened to talk every time Listo presses a button, sends Purple on her likely last mission. Meanwhile, at the Beauty Harry, business was booming, with Harry even making a sell for a rich celebrity guest star. No, seriously, as soon as I heard this character's voice and saw her design, I just knew she was a celebrity guest star. I guess all of those comedian guest stars appearing have kind of given me a bit of a sixth sense to this sort of stuff, as much as I don't want to admit it. Anyway, after a little mishap brought upon by her usual antics, Harry sends Emiru to do some shopping for Hagutan. Ruru soon follows and basically has to make sure Emiru doesn't blow her secret identity one day into her career as a superheroine. Granted, dispersing mobs who fight over salad oil of all things certainly wouldn't be unjustified. Still, by the end of their little trip, Emiru was depressed that she was unable to do anything heroic. For her, becoming a Precure was everything, and yet, as we'll later learn, she was unsure if she was really worthy of the title. Before that though, Emiru runs away from Ruru, leaving her partner confused and frustrated that she would just ditch her like that. And for once, after what's felt like a long while, Ruru talks with more robotic patterns, trying to logically decipher why she was currently upset with Emiru, and yet still felt a strong bond with her. And in a really good moment, Hana assures her that's not the case at all, as having both negative and positive feelings towards someone close to you is only natural. After all, as Elie Wiesel once said, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The simple fact that Ruru was thinking this much about Emiru was proof enough that she really cared about her. Elsewhere, Emiru revealed her inferiority complex to Harry and Homari. As it turns out, she still believed Ruru was the one meant to become a Precure and that she was weighing her friend down. The fact that she only got the original pre-heart thanks to literal divine intervention certainly didn't help matters. Still, Homari and Harry managed to cheer up by pointing out how Ruru was happy to have a partner like her, and how her original act of passing the pre-heart onto Ruru in spite of her own desires was an act worthy of a Precure in of itself. Thus, with a renewed confidence, Emiru was able to meet up with Ruru, who was trying and failing to play a tune. The two make up with a reprisal of their signature character song, and honestly, if the episode had ended here, it would have been a fine place to stop. Still, we gotta work in a Monster of the Week fight, with Purple hastily making one out of a groundskeeper.
What a rare acquaintance.
Ha! Wouldn't that have been an interesting crossover? But still, this fight was good, with Emiru and Ruru acting as vanguards and using impressive teamwork. They likely would have won on their own had it not been for a sudden status buff from Purple trying to prove she was better than Jealous. During the fight, Emiru's guitar was broken, but it was quickly avenged after the original trio joined the fight, and they proceeded to just obliterate poor Willie. Thus, the episode ended with Emiru quickly getting over her broken guitar so long as she could get a new melody sword from Hana. No, Emiru, you're supposed to ask your daddy for new toys. Oh boy, I'm predicting a lot of empty wallets next week. Of course, Hana was unable to comply with her demands, so Hakutan decided to summon some help from afar, even though October is still 4 months away. While this episode did a much better job actually establishing the difficulties the two new rookies have to overcome in order to truly become a part of the team, I do think that they have a long ways to go before they can actually climb out of the narrative holes the last couple of episodes have dug up, but still, at least they're going in the right directions. Again, the best parts of this episode were the moments where Emiru and Ruru were able to spend time with their seniors and just learn the values of what it means to be a Precure. One of the big complaints I saw main fans have over the past few episodes was the fact that Ruru suddenly stopped acting like an android after her last fight with the Precure. This didn't bother me as much, but I could see where they were coming from. So, even though it was just as sudden, it was nice to see Ruru acting like an android again, and trying to decipher her emotions, which were far too complex for any computer to quantify. Meanwhile, they managed to take advantage of Emiru's rushed ascension into becoming a Precure by somewhat acknowledging that maybe she did get the job before she was mentally prepared. All of this doesn't really justify the previous episode's pacing problems, but at least they're building off of it. Top that off with Kryasu continuing to be one of my favorite Precure villain factions because of the real world parallels amongst its staff, and you have the makings for one of the better filler episodes of this season. Now granted, that last scene did seem like kind of a cheap attempt at garnering a boost in ratings, but I won't pass any judgment and save it for next week. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my review of Super Robot Wars X. It's an okay game, but I do have my issues with it, as well as the franchise as a whole. Also, before the end of the month, I am planning on doing one more video unrelated to Precure before I restart the series-long reviews in July with Smile. Look forward to all of that, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and see you in the kitchen.